to first a motion to dismiss, I believe, and to appeal some of these convictions, but also to get out of jail, if you will. Any sense that maybe he could be let out given the conviction charges?
I'm not seeing that. So defense attorneys file those motions because if you don't, you're being incompetent. So if you get a decent result in a case and, you want to appeal it, you always apply for bail pending appeal, and you say, Judge, my client should be out. We're going to win on appeal. My client's a good guy. He's not going to run anywhere. He's not violent, that kind of thing. And there are several counters to that. And I think that's why the judge has repeatedly denied bail in this case, which I think signals something for the prosecution. But basically, the guidelines here, the things that he was convicted for have 10 years each. So it could be, up to 10 years, 20 years, but the guidelines are much shorter, and that's what we're fighting over now.
Yeah, okay, to that point, if you have a judge that repeatedly says no to your be released on bail here, what does that tell you for sentencing? Because you're trying to make a connection there, is at least what I'm hearing here, and you've got these two charges. Would they typically run concurrently? Would they run one after the other? How exactly do you see this playing out?
Well, they would typically run concurrently. However, there are guidelines here. And so Sean Diddy Combs is looking at a much lower number. And then, the prosecution is saying, okay, it's not going to be 10 years, but we want it to be 4 to 5 years. And the defense is saying, oh, that's way off. We're looking at about 21 to 27 months, so about 2 years. And he's already been in custody for about 10 months. So I think that based upon the signal, to your point, the prosecution can feel a little bit more secure that the judge is looking more in their direction than the defense. So he's probably looking at, closer to the high end of what the prosecution wants of, about 5 years.
So by the time this is all said and done, you said 10 months. Let's call it a year, right? Say it's 5. The judge splits the baby, if you will. Give half of that term. It's 5 years. I don't know what they call it, but time spent for behavior, et cetera. How does that work? Like the reduction of sentence? How quickly, if it's a 5-year sentence, can someone walk out, given the fact that they've spent about a year already in custody?
Sure. So he would have to spend a certain amount of time in custody, of course. And you're saying it's certainly the case where the judge might split the baby. Maybe the prosecution won't get everything. Again, the prosecution is asking for 4 to 5 years, something like that. The judge might give 4 years, the lower end of what the prosecution is asking for. But then he would also, Mr. Combs would be eligible for other programs, early release, parole, halfway house, things like that. And that kicks in at a certain time. That's something that could be argued about in court. It's something to some degree that parole has power over, even versus the court, the prison system. So it's multi-layered, and there's a lot of different cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, with the judge, with the prosecution, with the prison, with parole. So it's who's to say? It's all up in the air.
Really quickly before we go, obviously sentencing coming up October 3rd. There were a litany of charges here. It seemed as though the more serious one, the RICO charges, he was acquitted on. When it comes to sentencing, is that part of the equation for the judge? He was acquitted of the more serious charges. I only have, if you want to call them, the lesser charges before me.
Yes, that will be a big thing. The defense attorney could say, Judge, the prosecution was charging all these heinous crimes and the jury threw that out. So you shouldn't listen to them. They don't have any, they're not in line with what the public thinks about the behavior here. The prosecution will counter that. Let's look at the other history here. Look at the history of violence. Look at the video that we've all seen of the allegations of domestic violence in that hotel room. He wasn't convicted of that, but the judge can take past violence into consideration as an upward departure in terms of recommendations for sentencing.
All right, we'll see what happens October 3rd. Joseph, good to see you. Thank you for coming on. Happy weekend.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Well, when we come back, we're getting some beauty